£3 at the door, our hearts pounding out of our chest. They found our hiding spot. Get down, shut up! We wait for the inevitable. Nothing. False alarm. £3 more at the door. Let me in quick, she said. We opened the door and bolted back shut. Mary, what you doing? You're trying to get us killed, we said. He's gone, she said. What do you mean he's gone? I didn't stick around for the answer. I took the bolt off the door and I just bolted. Sprint into the tomb with a million thoughts sprinting through my head. John flies past and beats me there. I catch up and John's just standing there, gobsmacked. The stone was rolled over. I stoop into the place where Jesus' lifeless body lay just hours before. And now it's empty. Bar the clothes he was buried in, folded up tidy. It was empty. We look at each other speechless. I mean, could it? Has he done the impossible? The R word? We couldn't even bring ourselves to say it. Or we just being played, I thought. Some kind of sick joke, some trap set by the Romans, rabbis, Pilate, take your pick. We didn't hang around long enough to find out. We legged it back to the hiding spot. The others opened the door and bolted it back shut. And that's just before it happened. You know, the first time. Should have seen our faces. I jumped out of my skin. We told Thomas, he wasn't buying it. Till a week later, it happened again. Should have seen his face. You'd think we'd known better a third time, right? After things settled down, we go back home to Galilee. So we're down Tiberias Sea, right? There's me, Nate, Tom, James, John, the Zebedee boys. It's pitch black. We're 100 yards out, fishermen right in our sweet spot, trying to make a catch, failing abysmally. Anyway, day's breaking and this randomer is wandering the shore. Any luck, boys, he said. Not a single sardine, we said. Try the other side of the boat, he said. So we cast our nets the other side of the boat, and what do you know? So many fish, not even Matt the tax could count them. It's him, said John. Well, what are we doing, faffing about with all this fish, I thought. I dive straight in, splash, head down, swim to shore. I get there, and he's lit up this barbie. How'd you get on with the catch? Any joy, he said. Bring him over here, plenty of room, he said. I look round and see the boys dragging out of the water what must have been the biggest catch I'd ever seen. Anyone for breakfast? He said. So there we were, stuffing our faces with fish sarnies, just staring at him. We knew it was him, but no one dared ask. After breakfast, he asked me if I loved him 3 times. Yes, Lord, I said, as it brought to mind the 3 times I flat out denied him. Look after my sheep, he said. You got it, Lord, I said. He had, you know, done the impossible, risen. One time he asked us who he said he was. You're the Christ, I said. The anointed one. The one we'd all been waiting for. The hand-picked rescuer. Still, I didn't see it coming. Not the way it played out. But it was always part of the plan. He came to bear our brokenness to his breaking point. From fully perfect to fully broken to 2 days later fully fixed, so we can be forever fixed in him. Like I said, he'd done the impossible, risen, and there's no denying it. That changes everything.
Good morning. Welcome to our Easter Sunday service. The video we've just watched is from the Bible Society, and you might have spotted that it said part 2 at the beginning. And if you didn't see part 1 but you would like to, then it was part of our joint church Good Friday service. And you can find the link for that either on our Facebook page or on our website. And in some respects, today's sermon is part 2 of the Easter story. Because after the death and the despair and the seeming defeat of Friday, we celebrate today that that was not the end of the story. And that's important for us to remember, isn't it? Because often in our attempts to explain the good news of Jesus, we seem to end at the cross. But we must always bear in mind that without Easter Sunday, Good Friday is the failure and defeat of just another would-be Messiah. It's worth remembering too that on the first Easter morning, the women were not going to the tomb expecting to find a risen Jesus. Sometimes I think there's a danger that we read this story with kind of a full 2,000 years of hindsight on our side, and we become a bit blasé about it. We become so used to hearing the ending of the story that we forget that the women were going to the tomb not in hope, but in despair. They were going there to mourn, to perform a burial ritual on their friend, on the one whom they loved, in whom they had pinned all of their hopes. This was not a cheery morning stroll, but rather was a walk filled with grief and dread at what they might find. This is unquestionably the most important and most wonderful event in all of human history. But in order for it to take place, in order for the resurrection to come, there needed first to be mourning. There needed to be pain. There needed to be despair and ultimately death. And so it is for us too. In order for us to know the power of resurrection, to see the transforming effect of God on our lives, so first we must know the suffering. It is only into darkness that God can bring light. It's only when we stumble and fall that God is able to lift us up again. It's only as we face the grief of death and loss that we can truly know the joy of new life. And so often we try all we can to avoid pain, to run away from suffering and to hide our failures. But without those, we're not able to truly experience the transforming resurrection power of God. Because, make no mistake, the resurrection is not just a one-time act. Instead, it is an ongoing process whereby God breathes new life into the dry bones, where he restores that which is broken, where he brings reconciliation and hope, where once there was anger and despair. And in John's account of that first Easter morning, which is today's reading in our Lent course, the last reading in our Lent course, we get a glimpse, a wonderful picture of the very personal nature of God in the way that he brings about that transformation. Because there are so many ways that Jesus could have chosen to show himself after the resurrection. But how does he choose to do it? Well, he calls Mary by name. And there's something just so personal, so intimate, so wonderful about that moment, that Mary recognizes her Lord by the way that he says her name. And in that moment, as Mary is called by name, her life is transformed. Gone are the tears and the weeping. The passage says that she cries out, but this time it's a very different cry to earlier. This time she cries out in joy. Rabboni, my own dear teacher. It is into the pain and the brokenness, into the darkness, the very moment that she is in kind of ultimate despair, that Jesus calls her name and transforms her life from despair to delight, from grief to joy. In a beautiful essay on the resurrection, the theologian and writer Chris Barnes reminds us of what actually matters. The question that Easter asks of us is not, do we believe in the doctrine of the resurrection? And frankly, that is not particularly hard. What the Gospels ask is not, do you believe, but have you encountered the risen Christ? Have you heard Jesus call your name? Have you allowed him to transform your life, to bring hope where there was once despair, to bring life instead of death? And just as Good Friday is not the end of the story, so Easter Sunday is merely the beginning of another. Because having in one instant kind of transformed Mary's life, Jesus then immediately gives her a task. As she embraces him, holds him close, no doubt reluctant ever to let go, kind of for fear of losing him again. Jesus tells her not to hold on to him, but instead to go and tell the other disciples. And so off she goes, not to deliver some kind of fantastic theological exposition of what has just taken place, but just to simply say, I have seen the Lord. And therein lies the challenge for us, I think, as well. Do we seek to cling on to Jesus, to hold him close, to sit at his feet and enjoy the blessings just for ourselves? Or are we actively seeking to encourage others to experience that same transformation that we have received? If we truly desire that others hear the voice of Jesus calling out to them just as he has called out to us, then we need to heed Mary's example. And as I've said a few times over the last few weeks, we don't have to have all of the answers. We don't need a neatly summarised theological explanation of the gospel. But instead, we just have to be willing to share with others what Jesus has done for us. As the writer Debbie Thomas says, for our testimonies to ring true, they must originate in radical, intimate encounter. The question is not why should people in general believe, but rather why do you believe? How has the risen Christ revealed himself to you? And we must be willing to go to the dark places, to the painful places, to the places where people struggle and weep. Because it is to those people that Jesus sends us, to declare that his kingdom is coming on earth as it is in heaven. And that one day, as Revelation 21 reminds us, he will wipe every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. And so, as we go out into the world, let us be people not who live in the despair and the guilt and the questioning of Good Friday, but rather in the joy and the awe and the wonder of Easter Sunday. And as we hear the voice of Jesus calling out to us, bringing about transformation from death to life, from despair to joy, Let us follow Mary's example and declare to the world, I have seen the Lord. Let's finish in prayer. Lord God, when we are despairing, when the world is full of grief, when we see no way ahead and hope has gone away, roll back the stone. And although we fear change, although we're not ready, although we'd rather weep and run away, roll back the stone. Because we're coming with the women. Because we hope where hope is vain. Because you call us from the grave and show us the way. So roll back the stone.